Regrettably, I'm about to cause trouble. Written and narrated by Amie McNee. Chapter 7. It was 3 days since they had decided my fate. I had conjured up dozens of plans in my mind. Few were executable. Though one ambitious plan was to get Edward actually executed. My father's plans, on the other hand, had moved quickly, and consequently, I was standing out the front of Sherburn in a virginal blue dress about to be packed onto my carriage and sent down south to marry my lumpish hedge pig. My body was shaking. I wondered if I'd rather die. I hadn't seen or heard from any of my brothers or my father. I may never see them again in all my life, and they didn't give a slither of a fuck. My mother was looking at me. I wondered if she would kiss or embrace me in farewell. She did not. I could read her emotions easily, but I was never able to determine whether she loved me or not. "You shouldn't be wearing all those jewels, Magdalene. Give them to Agnes." "I will be allowed some inch of dignity, Mother." I knew I looked ridiculous. I was wearing everything I could possibly fit upon my person. Multiple necklaces, my biggest pearl earrings, my most lavish dress, Jimmy tucked under one arm. I wanted to remind myself who I was. A lord and lady's daughter. I was meant for court, not for farmers. Mother sighed. "Your father will be displeased." But she made no gesture to snatch my jewels. "I will write to you with any developments." I looked at her. I was glad I hadn't inherited those thin lips, but I would do anything to stay with her and her perpetual bad mood. "You are making a mistake," I reminded her. "I will write," she said again. I turned to the carriage. I made eye contact with John, the groom, who nodded sheepishly. "I expect I will be back very soon," I said to no one in particular. No one in particular replied. I got in the carriage. The wheels began to turn, and I felt the ground slip out from beneath me. I sat down. My tummy was turning over and over. With each turn of the wheel, it went around. It was nauseating. I wondered if I would be sick. I sat focused on the floor of the carriage for some time, trying to stem both my tears and the bile rising in my throat. The dirt road turned to cobbles. We were heading into town. There was a heavy lurch and my eyes widened in panic. I was going to be sick. "John? My lady? Pull over, be quick." The horses slowed, and without waiting for John to open my door, I jumped out and sprayed my last supper all over the side of the road. A bit of chewed bread sat delicately on the petals of a wild carrot. "Shall I fetch help, my lady?" John asked, giving me some distance. I took a raggedy breath. "I've heard that the wild carrot flower has been renamed. They called it Queen Anne's lace. They've named it after her." I wiped my mouth and looked up. "I just vomited on the Queen's own flora." I tried to laugh, but it turned into a sob. I could not go through with this. I looked down the road we were destined to travel. "John, time to attempt one of my last resort machinations." "Yes, my lady?" I exhaled. In my bust, I had put coins. It would have been more than half a year's wages for John. "If I give you 30 shillings, will you drop me off in town and pretend to have taken me to the farm?" He stared at me, shocked. Unembarrassed, I put my hand down my dresses and reached for the purses of money. I had taken it from Thomas's coffers, but not even that could make me smile. I handed it to him. "What if they ask me what happened?" "Tell them you dropped me off. When they find out I'm not there, they'll just think I ran away after you left me." He winced, but his eyes were fixed on the heavy purse in his hands. After a long, long moment, he gave a small nod. "Where shall I drop you?" "The apothecary," I said, hardly getting the words out. I climbed back into the carriage for my short ride. Sometimes you just have to take things into your own hands. I knew what I was really destined for. Glory. Court. If I was shipped off to a farm, I'd be forgotten. I couldn't let it happen. I looked out the window, focusing intently on not throwing up again. In what felt like mere minutes, we were stopped outside the apothecary. I waited until John opened my door. He looked anxious, but he helped me down the carriage steps with a steady hand. "I am indebted to you, John." "What am I to do now?" "Go, use the treasure I gave you to eat and drink. Get a room and stay the night in the next town over." He was still looking upset. "Go, get my trunk down, and then leave." It would have been around 8 at night, not yet dark. I needed to get inside quick. I knocked on the door. Fucking hell. Lady Maude Beckett, seeking refuge in the witch's den. Zita answered. She looked me up and down. "We don't do refunds." I need help. I need to take you up on your offer. I offered you nothing. Hildy said that I might come here if I was in trouble. You do not look in trouble. She glanced at the obnoxiously sized ruby around my neck. You may have my pearl earrings if you let me stay. Stay? I just need a place to stay for a little while. I'm in trouble, I repeated, damn tears coming to my eyes again. Hildy poked her head around Zita's middle. Is that Maude? Come in, Poppet, come in. John followed us in with my trunk and laid it down. You may go, John. Good luck, miss. Miss? I almost chastised him, but I held my tongue. There were greater issues afoot. I need refuge for a little while. I can pay you. Of course. No. Zita was shaking her head. The two witches looked at one another. Zita began using her hands to speak to Hildy. Angry, sharp gestures, and then one final long finger pointing at me. Hildy was a sweet, harmless-looking lady. I worried about her ability to fight for me. She stays. Hildy spoke clearly. Perhaps I need not doubt her. No, Hildy. More hand gestures. No more strays. I looked down at Jimmy bundled up in my arms. This cat was pristinely bred, hadn't been on the streets in his life. His supper consisted of meat and bread, for God's sakes. I was about to defend him when Hildy spoke. She's not a stray. 'Twas I that they called a stray. Rude. This is foreseen in the stars and the tea leaves. I shuddered. I was foreseen? Zita had gone quiet at this. Hildy took hold of her hand. I wondered what their relation was. Sisters, perhaps. They were close. Hildy rubbed Zita's hand gently, looking up at her with most pitiful, sweet look. I watched Zita's tight lips quiver. I will not have it any other way. Hildy turned to me. You may take refuge here, Maude. I let out a long exhale. I just need to hide for a few days while I figure something else to do. Zita finally took her gaze off Hildy's face and turned to me. You will not pay us with your God-forsaken jewels, she said. We will give you board and some food, but stay up there and out of sight. We need someone to help us around the shop. You can work for us, Hildy said sweetly. No, Zita said. Hildy's face melted back into that soft, pleading visage. 'Twas written we would find a helping hand. I see it in my tea leaves each day. You have seen it in the stars. Maude is she. I am sure of it. Zita pinched the bridge of her nose. Besides, my love, much as I adore you, your opinion matters not. This is my apothecary. Zita may have the temperament of the matriarch, but it seemed Hildy was in charge. You can have this ruby. It is worth the wage of 3 helping girls for an entire year. They would be a fool to refuse it. If you need sanctuary, you can just help us in the shop, Hildy said again. I can't. I'm not a witch. My pulse had ramped all the way back up. This was my punishment for disobeying my parents. This was the devil's chosen path for me. He had led me straight to the witch's den to become what I feared I truly was. Then you can leave. Zita moved to open the door. I looked pleadingly at Hildy. What happened at the whorehouse, Poppet? I couldn't go through with it. It was false. She nodded empathetically. He'll be getting a divorce or an annulment soon, I expect. And what did your family want to do with you? They didn't send you here, Zita asked. No, I came here on my own volition. They wanted me to marry a farm boy. You couldn't abide that? He'll think I'm a witch too. Why? Probably because you're making me work as one at an apothecary, I said loudly. Zita squinted at me. My parents, I swallowed. They will see the error of their ways soon. Farmers are below my station. You sound like your mother. Do you know my mother? Of course I don't. But I know what all noble women are like. I see you. You are selfish and blind to the real world. Well, fuck. I put Jimmy down. He moved slowly to Zita, wrapping his tail around her ankle. Traitor. I didn't know what to say. I had nowhere else to go. We'll give you room, food, and protection, Maude. We just need a little help at the counter, Hildy said. As you wish, I breathed. Thank you, I managed. We can discuss particulars in the morning. The 2 wise women led me through a door behind the counter. It was a small kitchen with a large fireplace and cauldron. Take your things to the 2nd floor, Hildy indicated the small staircase to the left. There is a spare room. I looked at my heavy trunk. I would not be able to take it up there by myself. Try, said Zita, reading my mind like the demon, witch, horrid woman she was. I grabbed the handles at both ends and lifted. Christ. I had to stop 5 times on the short staircase. Zita followed me, watching without words. The room they had spare was clearly for storage. It was filled with trunks, bottles, and plants, but there was a mattress in the corner. "This used to be my mother's room," said Hildy, bustling in through the door with a cup of something steaming. She passed me the mug. "Ginger and honey," she smiled. "Do you want a candle?" I shook my head. "I'm fine." I wasn't fine. I did want a candle. Who would want to spend their first night in a witch's coven without light? She went searching in a trunk and found a blanket and placed it on the dusty mattress. "Do you need anything else?" "I'm fine," I said again. I looked to Zita. Her long and elegant body was framed ominously in the doorway. They couldn't be sisters. If they were, never had I seen 2 more different-looking siblings in my life. "Well, good evening, Poppet." They left. The only light in the room came from a half-clouded moon. I hit my head violently on a low roof beam and spilt half my hot water all over my hands and the floor. I hated myself for not having accepted the candle. Gingerly, I navigated the way. There was only one point in the room where I could stand up straight, right in the centre of the chamber. "Jimmy," I whispered. I could hear his light padded feet wandering around somewhere, but I couldn't see him. I bent down and moved to the corner of the room, where I sat on the filthy mattress. I put the blanket over my knees. I wouldn't be able to get out of this dress without help. I had expected there to be help. It smelt funny in here. "Jimmy?" I called again, hoping he'd notice the pain in my voice. He brushed past my leg. I exhaled and scooped him up, sitting him in my lap. His soft touch released something in me, and no amount of pride could stifle my wails. Who cared what the witches thought anyway? After a while, the sobs softened down to a steady but less aggressive flow of tears. I laid myself sideways and trapped my poor cat in an iron grip. He didn't seem to mind. Agreeable fellow. The house creaked. I could hear things happening outside, and the roof seemed to compress and release as if it were breathing. I thought I could hear someone coming up the stairs. I pulled the blanket up higher. "Maude?" It was lucky Hildy had such a recognisable voice, or I would have screamed. "What?" I shouted, and the door creaked open. "I think you do need this." She was holding light, but it was not a candle. It was a red orb. I shook my head frantically. I didn't need demon work in my room. "It's nothing devilish," she said, reading my mind like an actual devil. "The candle is within a glass sphere, and like the windows of a church, it gives off a soothing, warm light. It will calm your troubled soul and let you sleep." She placed it at the foot of my bed. The red light bounced softly off the wooden floorboards. She clambered her way over to me and sat down on the edge of my bed. I whimpered in fear, but it would fall on deaf ears. She placed a hand on my head, and I felt my body uncurl. She must have cast a spell, but as my body unravelled, I did not care. This spell was a good spell. She patted me, just like I patted Jimmy. She stroked my hair, and I stared at the soft light flickering off the walls, and then I wasn't anymore. I woke, and I had to remember. Jimmy was nestled in the huge folds of my skirt. I lay there for a long time. Jimmy did too. I had no one but myself. And Jimmy. I wonder if I cut my entire leg off, would I be more marriageable? I wonder if I could still have baby boys if I had one leg. But it wasn't just my leg. It was all over my tummy too. I couldn't live without a tummy, let alone have babies. My breathing was laboured from having to sleep in a corset. I tried to take a full inhale. I couldn't. But I would be fine. I didn't need to take a full breath. I stared at Jimmy, who was playing lazily with a thread come loose from my skirt. With some effort, I sat myself up and stooped over to look out the window. I watched as people walked by and entered the apothecary. They were a varied bunch of customers, of all ages, men and women, some off-puttingly poor-looking, some more respectable. After I had seen a dozen patrons enter and exit below, my tummy rumbled so loudly it gave me an actual fright. Jimmy and I ventured downstairs into the kitchen cum great hall. Zita was sitting at a small table in front of the hearth and gazed at me intently as I entered while stirring a pot on the fire with one hand. "There are food scraps in the garden." She pointed to the back door. Holy shit, I was to be treated like a stray dog. "For Jimmy," she added. "There's bread here for you." She gestured in front of her. I tore myself a large chunk and slathered it with thick yellow cream. She kept stirring and staring. It was unnerving. I opened the back door in search of Jimmy's scraps. My mood shifted for the first time in days. I felt a lightness in my chest and a small smile tug at my cheeks. Our kitchen garden was sprawled out before me in undulating thickets of different plots and plants. The witches were keen gardeners. I scooped Jimmy up under my arm and we followed the small pathways in between the raised garden beds of tall beanstalks and cabbage and carrots. Big bumblebees accompanied us on our tour. I smelt and tasted herbs I'd never seen before. These women just got to do whatever they wanted to do. They got to tend to their garden and dirty their nails in the earth. I felt a strange surge of envy within me. I chewed on some mint. The sun shone. And for a moment, it didn't matter that I was in a witch's garden. I was just happy to be outside and in the sun. There was a splash as someone poured out their chamber pot. It broke the mood. I looked up at the back of the houses. We were in a long line of timbered buildings, the black crisscrossing beams stretching all the way up the street, interrupted by the small stone apothecary wedged between the neat modern homes. The woman who had thrown the chamber pot of piss was watching me. I was holding a black cat in the witch's garden. At any moment, I could cast a spell or disappear altogether. I was almost tempted to stretch my hands in the air and yell some sort of gobbledygook. I refrained. I found the bowl of scraps by the back door and re-entered their not-so-great hall, plopping Jimmy and his food on the stone floor. "How did you sleep?" Zita asked. "Fine." I took another hunk of bread. "Is sleeping in a corset and fine jewels a courtly beauty regime?" I winced and took another large bite. "Where's Hildy?" I asked, not really interested. "She's with a patron. She'll be here in a minute, and we may talk about how this will work." "We won't need to discuss anything, I don't think." "Why is that?" "Because I'll be leaving soon." "And where are you going?" "Back to my family, I would think." Zita nodded. She didn't look disbelieving, but she wasn't convinced either. "I was born a Shaftsberry, and I still hold my status. I still have my mother's potency for childbearing. This has been an unfortunate week, but I've thought it over and they need time to reconsider, to brush off the drama. They will call me home soon enough." She nodded again. "That might be true, Maude." "It is." "Very well, but whilst you stay in our apothecary, you work for us." Hildy walked in. Her face was covered in blood. I took several steps back. "God save you!" I gasped. She went to the bucket of water in the kitchen garden and splashed her face. She left the door open, and a warm breeze came through. Zita signed to her as she came back in, speaking at the same time. "Maude wants to know why you have blood on your face." Hildy smiled. "A vigorous leeching," she explained. "Sometimes when you try and remove them, they get very sucky." She made a noise with her mouth that was incredibly unpleasant, and then she giggled. She was undeniably sweet. She sat next to Zita and placed a hand on her knee. "We were thinking you could sit at the front desk, Maude, help people with simple requests for herbs and ointments." "No." I shook my head. This wasn't debatable. "I would be recognized." "I doubt it," said Zita. "Yours is not a well-known face. If we get you some more modest clothing and perhaps let your hair down, you won't look anything like a lord's daughter." "No." I clutched at my skirts. "Maude?" Hildy's high-pitched voice stilled the small room. "Maude, would you like to tell us why everyone thinks you're a witch?" Unexpected tears started flowing from my cursed eyes. Bewitched tears. She made me cry. Hildy made me cry. And they were unstoppable. She stood and came to me. She put a hand on the small of my back and guided me into a seat. "No," I said eventually. I wondered if either of them had a mark like mine. The witches glanced at one another. "I'm going to explain the day-to-day workings here, Maude. All you have to do is listen." Hildy was stroking my arm gently. "We are an apothecary. People come here for lavender to sleep, rose oil for skin ailments, basic cures for basic ailments. People come in here to see me for my expertise in the humus and the corporeal body. People come to see Zita for her astrological knowledge." Hildy was smiling at Zita, pride emanating from her soft blue eyes. "Zita of the stars," she added. "People also come for charms and problems with poltergeists and whatnot. Neither of us are experts in that field, but we do what we can." I shuddered, but didn't try to stop Hildy's soft petting. Hildy uses the room with the hanging garden, and I use the smaller room next to hers for my practices, Zita added. Do you have any questions? I had quite a lot of questions. Do you call yourself witches? Witches, white witches, wise women, healers, charmers, astrologers, apothecaries, Zita said, taking the pot off the fire. But yes. If you're witches, why don't you fix Hildy's hearing? There was a silence. I blushed. That had not been an appropriate question. We have tried to fix Hildy's hearing. We have done everything we thought sensible. And when nothing worked, we sought other people sensible. When that gave us nothing, we resorted to the insensible. We blew trumpets in her ears, we have poured oil, honey, vinegar, and garlic juices down there. One wizard attempted to drip a mixture of eel fat and human blood into her ears. No, I gasped. I lost my hearing for a reason, Maude, Hildy said, smiling. She took my hands and put them over her ears. Without my hearing, I see more clearly. I didn't know what she meant, but I didn't ask her to elaborate. Next question, Zita asked. This question was one I'd been thinking about for a while, but I was nervous about asking it. Do you lie with demons? Zita signed the question for Hildy, finishing with a horrible, horned, manic impression of a devil face. Hildy laughed. I almost joined her in her mirth. Her laugh tinkled so prettily around the not-so-great hall, joining the streams of sunlight that came through the window. No, there's no devil work here, only learned women. We do not lie with demons, Hildy explained, still laughing. I lie with Zita. I looked between the two of them, back and forwards. How? I asked eventually. The shop door banged open, and the bell rang out manically. Witches!